Good Friday afternoon to you. For Telesur, I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Pope Francis was the first to address the UN Sustainable Development Summit. During his speech, he attacked economic and social exclusion, which he described as a total denial of human fraternity that attack human and environmental rights. With Malala among the audience, the Pakistani girl who was shot by extremists for defending girls' rights for education, the Pope called on world leaders to boost education for girls. He also demanded them to end the destruction of biodiversity and to fight human arms and drug trafficking. A conflict, he said, that is silently killing millions of people. The pontiff also denounced the, quote, unlimited desire for power and material well-beings, end quote, which lead to abuse, adding that the poorest are the ones who suffer most.
The international financial agencies should care for the sustainable development of countries and should ensure that they are not subjected to oppressive lending systems which, far from promoting progress, subject people to mechanism.
The Pope also called for a ban on nuclear weapons and asked for a lasting Iran deal. In other issues, Francis called to respect all human rights, including the rights of the unborn. The Vatican has formally objected only one of the 17 goals aimed in the summit, gender equality. The Holy See has reservations regarding universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, which is one of the targets included in the goals document. And as part of the welcome for Pope Francis, the United Nations raised the Vatican flag for the first time at the UN. A resolution was adopted by UN member states which allowed the Vatican flag to be raised along with the Palestinian flag. Palestinians see the symbolic gesture as an important reminder of their campaign for statehood. The Pope was opening the Sustainable Development Summit at the 70th Assembly General of the United Nations, which is being attended by over 160 heads of state. The meeting will focus on an ambitious set of goals, global goals to end extreme poverty by the year 2030, promote health and education, and combat climate change. The General Assembly may even adopt a resolution condemning the U.S. blockade on Cuba, which has cost the island over $830 billion. Cuban President Raul Castro will speak at the Assembly on Monday, the same day of President Obama's speech. Both are expected to meet at some moment, Monday or Tuesday. According to both U.S. and Russian officials, President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin will hold their first face-to-face meeting in New York on Monday. On the agenda is Russia's internal policy, the restive situation in the Middle East, as well as working with Russia on the Syrian conflict. And we go now to our correspondent in the U.S. who has been following the Pope's travels, Bianca Perez. Bianca, Pope Francis is the first religious figure to ever open the Assembly General, although he is the fourth to speak at it. Why do you think that is?
Thank you, Regan. Well, I think it's very significant that Pope Francis spoke before them, just because of the message that he has been bringing along with him throughout all of his papal visits, not only here to the United States, but also every other country that he has visited. I think that's what gives it the most significance, the fact that, as he mentioned during his speech, the risk to environmental destruction, the eradication of poverty, an end to the drug trade and human trafficking around the world, as well as the end to nuclear weapons deals, which he mentioned the Iran deal as well. So these are all just very significant things. It's a very significant message that he has, and I think the fact that so many people can relate to his message and are so grateful to him for bringing this is what makes this particular speech so significant to everyone.
He's also repeated his concerns about social inequality, this much we all know across the world, and has blamed the international financial agencies, including the UN, of abuse and the practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest, of course, in the context of an oppressive economic system. How was this received by those present?
I'm sorry, Regan, can you repeat the question?
The Pope has repeated his concerns about social inequality around the world and spoke about the abuse of poor economic countries. How was his message received by those present?
Well, everyone at the UN, I think, was very grateful that he brought up this message. Of course, he was speaking to certain countries, mostly the most powerful ones in the world, about social inequality. I think particularly in the United States, there is a lot very present, the social inequality, and a lot of the citizens were hopeful that in his message he would bring this. So it was received very well by the public and by world leaders as well, because it's a subject that really needs to begin to be spoken about. Many feel that the most powerful countries in the world are not doing as much as they could be doing, and for these reasons, I think the Pope felt it was necessary to bring this during his speech.
And we understand that some relatives of the Ayotzinapa students from Mexico have asked to meet with the Pope when he arrives in Philadelphia. Do you think this will finally happen?
I believe that because of the recent things that he has done, as we know, the little girl who stopped the Pope Mobile so that he can receive a letter from her, his luncheon with the homeless here in Washington, D.C., all of the different kind of actions that he has been doing, as well as the memorial. He visited today the memorial of the 9/11 attacks in New York, and he prayed a multi-faith prayer for everyone that was deceased during this attack. So I think the kindness that he has been showing in these different acts of wanting to be with the people would probably guarantee that at some point they are able to speak with him, especially because this is such a significant subject to everyone around the world, and it's something that I'm sure is very meaningful to the Pope as well. So I wouldn't put it past him to allow them to meet with him due to the different actions that he has shown throughout his papal visit thus far.
Thanks so much, Bianca, for following his journeys. Quick question before you go. Have you gotten a chance to meet him as yet?
I am sorry, Regan, I couldn't hear the last sentence.
Quickly before you go, have you gotten a chance to meet the Pope as yet?
Yes, we were able to meet with the Pope yesterday during his luncheon with the homeless. We got as close as you could possibly get. So that was a very enriching experience for me as a journalist.
Great. Thanks so much, Bianca. We'll touch base with you another time. Still no justice in the case of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, just hours away from the first anniversary of their forced disappearance. Nor have the remains of at least 42 of the students been found. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto finally received the parents, pressured by recent reports contradicting the official version. It was the second time they met since the disappearance a year ago. The relatives came out of the meeting with anger and outrage after Peña Nieto rejected all 8 demands they presented to President Nieto. They described him as a cold-blooded person, uninterested in solving the case. They also accused him and his government of continuously lying to them and the media, and condemned him for making useless counter-proposals. Our correspondent Clayton Khan has more on this.
It is nearly the eve of marking the one-year anniversary since the 43 Ayotzinapa students were forcibly disappeared by police in Iguala Guerrero. The parents of the youth continue their protests and actions, holding a 43-hour hunger strike in the Mexican capital.
The Mexican government thinks it can lie to society and to us, saying that it was a crime from the mafia, but when we know it was state-sponsored crime.
After independent experts refuted the official investigation which focused on organized crime members killing the missing students, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto was pressured to meet with the families.
President Enrique Peña Nieto has expressed to all the government institutions that they are on the side of the parents, that the Attorney General and Interior Secretary have the instructions to listen to the parents and support at all times.
The families and their representatives presented a list of demands that in essence call for the authorities to launch a new investigation to be overseen by independent investigators that will find truth and justice in the case, yet they say their petition was not accepted.
The 8 points that the parents presented to the President of the Republic, today he has not committed to fulfilling any of them.
While the families have had little to no trust with the president's office since the youth were disappeared, they expressed a degree of hope that the meeting with Peña Nieto would provide new advances. Instead, their deception with the authorities has only deepened.
From here we say to our government that they need to learn from their errors and that if they cannot resolve the problem, they need to leave it to the experts and to people who are serious and responsible.
The families will end their hunger strike before Saturday's anticipated mass march in the capital, which will mark the one-year anniversary of the students' disappearance. Clayton Cantala Sur, Mexico City.
Indigenous Bolivians hailed the International Court of Justice's decision on Thursday, reaffirming its jurisdiction in the maritime dispute between Chile and Bolivia. The court in The Hague rejected Chile's opposition by a vote of 12-2 and said that it can rule in the dispute. President Evo Morales also expressed his satisfaction and his confidence on the international institution.
We accept this first decision taken by the International Court of Justice with humility and confidence. For international agencies to make justice, we will keep working along with social movement, along with the president and with the people. Help Bolivia.
Por eso, hermanas y hermanos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Seguiremos trabajando juntos con los movimientos sociales, con expresidentes, con todo el pueblo boliviano y apoyado por el mundo entero. Felicidades, mucha suerte. ¡Que viva Bolivia!
The landmark announcement made on Wednesday by the Colombian government and FARC rebels regarding the nation's peace process has been received enthusiastically by victims of the conflict. Victims and families have described the deal, which outlines a judicial process to prosecute those responsible for crimes, as historic. The victims themselves have played a significant role in the process, and for many in Colombia, it seems that for the first time in more than 5 decades, the conflict may finally be coming to an end. The Colombian Navy, along with Ecuadorian forces, found a semi-submersible narco submarine under construction in the southern department of Nariño. The 12-meter-long, 3-meter-wide vessel, which could carry up to 5 tons of cocaine chlorhydrate, was being built in the area where a FARC group engages in criminal activities and was allegedly used by gangs to smuggle drugs. And for more on the peace deal reached at the FARC, we return now to our correspondent, Natalia Margarita in Colombia. Hi, Natalia. First of all, for those who may not know, what was agreed to in Havana between the Colombian government and the FARC rebels, and why is it so significant?
What has been agreed there in Havana between the FARC and the government, Reagan, is the model of justice that will allow this transition from an armed conflict to peace and reconciliation, and mostly important, to the compensation of victims. So in any armed conflict, in any conflict in the world, the transitional justice model is a challenge, and it is a challenge because it implies to determine who is to be considered as victim, who the perpetrators are, and which are going to be the sanctions imposed to those perpetrators. Particularly in Colombia, this was a huge and enormous challenge because we're talking here of a more than 5 decades armed conflict that has a diversity of actors who directly or indirectly play a role in this conflict. The challenge, as I said before, is also the sanctions. You cannot see within the resolution of an armed conflict the sanctions under the ordinary justice. It's not as simple as saying you put some perpetrators in jail, because this is about a peace negotiation, not a judicial process where the insurgency here were going to surrender, but it's a peace negotiation, a peace process. So you need to start considering alternative sanctions, for instance. And that's what has been agreed there in Havana, that model of transitional justice. In the case of what has been agreed, Colombia has prioritized restorative justice over a punitive one. And what a restorative justice means It means justice that will be mainly focused in compensating the damages of the more than 5 decades armed conflict victims. This is going to be the focus. Victims are going to be on the center of this transitional justice model that has just been agreed between both parties involved in our peace negotiation.
Thanks so much for that update. We also understand, though, that President Santos has just addressed the UN Assembly General today. Surprisingly, he has not made any reference to the FARC deal. Why do you think that is?
Well, it was not part of his agenda. His agenda for his UN speech was released earlier this week. And this agreement, this historic agreement of justice, for instance, was not part of it. That this happened on Wednesday. The issues of his agenda that were defined earlier this week, as I said before, were economy, sustainable development, mainly. So, well, there were not expectations that, or he was not expected to be addressing or making direct references to this historic agreement on justice that we had this week.
Your updates are really appreciated, Natalia. Thank you so much. We hope to touch base with you very soon again. Moving on now, the government of Peru has announced a new dialogue with the residents of the southern Isle province of Arequipa, about the Tia Maria mining project. Today is the last day of a 72-hour hunger strike to protest against this project. Southern Copper Corporate is to invest about $1.4 billion for the building of the project, which is expected to produce around 120,000 annual tons of copper rods. Over 1,500 people have rallied on Thursday to protest against it as the 32nd Mining Convention, Perumin, was taking place. The meeting gathered representatives of the main Peruvian and international mining companies. Ryan Mora has more.
Peruvian farmers are on the final day of a 3-day protest in the Valley of Tambo in southern Peru against the Tia Maria mining project of Southern Copper Corporation. Meanwhile, roughly 100 kilometers away in the city of Arequipa, the president of Southern Copper, Oscar González Rocha, has again defended the Tia Maria project at a business convention on mining. The company's push to continue with the mine, despite community and environmental concerns, has led to the largest social conflict in the country over the last year, with at least 4 casualties resulting from violent confrontations. Civil society groups from around the country are also in Arequipa to hold a People's Summit. Parallel to the Convention on Mining, they are discussing how to prevent abuses from extractive industries that are contaminating their environment. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
In the context of Argentina's coming elections, the economy is in the spotlight. From Buenos Aires, our correspondent Laureano Ponce with those details.
Next of an election year in Argentina, the country's economic model is permanently under scrutiny. After 15 years of wealth distribution policies and welfare programs carried out by the ruling Front for Victory, different opinion surveys show that almost 60% of the population believe their economic situation is good. For many experts, this marks that a new consensus about economics is taking shape in Argentina.
We are part of a region that has always had the ability to think for itself and the world, and to build a new direction for the historic changes we are living.
As part of the initiatives that seek to encourage alternative economic views, the first summit on Latin American economic thinking kicked off in Buenos Aires on Thursday. The goal of the summit is to start building the path to counterbalance the economic views of the establishment in the region.
These initiatives are necessary so we can quickly build a theory to consolidate what we have gained. But most of all, we can face the urgent challenges that the ferocity of the capitalist crisis puts before us.
The summit counted on the participation of more than 40 economists from Latin America, Europe and the US, including the economy minister Axel Kicillof, who proposed the foundation of a new Latin American economic thinking. Besides sharing views, the participants agreed on the need to strengthen regional unity in economic matters in order to help boosting wealth distribution in Latin America. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
The European Union will be using warships now in the refugee crisis. We have the details on this and much more next.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington. Wherever the newsmakers will be there. From watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Facts that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
In the aftermath of the Hajj tragedy in Saudi Arabia's Mecca on Thursday, blame has now been shifted to Saudi authorities. New reports increased the death toll to 1,300 and over 2,000 injured. The disaster is the worst of its kind in 25 years. One survivor said that police closed all entrances and exits except one, while another stated that there was overcrowding and no room to maneuver. And while the pilgrims are blaming the authorities, Saudi Arabia's health minister suggested in a statement that pilgrims bore some of the blame as they ignored crowd control rules. However, Saudi Arabia's king has ordered an investigation and a revision of how plans for the pilgrimage is managed. Warships will now be used to intercept and arrest human traffickers who have stuffed thousands of refugees into small, unsafe boats, contributing significantly to the deaths of many. According to the European Union's Foreign Affairs chief, this is part of a military operation that aims at not only ending the trafficking trade and preventing further refugee deaths, but also to improve border controls and security. This phase of the operation will begin on October 7th and will involve 4 ships, 4 planes, and staff from 22 EU countries. Volkswagen's 20-member supervisory board is expected to name a new CEO soon after Martin Winterkorn resigned this week. Since the crisis broke, the company's shares are down more than 30% in value. 60-year-old Matthias Mueller, who is the current head of Volkswagen's Porsche unit, has emerged as a favorite to succeed Winterkorn. The UK government has come under scrutiny for not acting on the revelations of the damning report. In the US, a multi-state investigation has already been launched. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has committed to relieve his country of the bailout in 4 years. He added that Greece needs to move quickly in order to secure a positive review from its lenders. Debt relief decisions will begin in the coming weeks. Tsipras will face a long to-do list that includes the implementation of the austerity measures that were mandated by the country's creditors. Simultaneously, the leader has to deal with the waves of refugees arriving on Greek shores on a daily basis. US President Barack Obama and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping will announce a major deal to jointly combat climate change. The announcement was made after both leaders met at the White House. The meeting was private, but officials on both sides said talks were at times tense when talking about cybercrimes, as well as the Chinese military's buildup in the South China Sea. But both presidents did arrive to modest achievements on bilateral investment, as well as rules to lower the risk of aerial confrontations in the Asia-Pacific region. Switzerland's Attorney General has opened criminal proceedings against FIFA President Sepp Blatter. The controversial soccer head was interrogated over suspected criminal mismanagement after chairing a FIFA Executive Committee meeting in Zurich. Blatter faces accusations that he misappropriated funds and violated his duties as the head of the World Football's governing body. Japan's Education and Sports Minister Hakubuni Shimomura has tendered his resignation over an independent investigation launched into the cancelled plans for the country's Olympic Stadium. This after the stadium's original design was put aside back in July when building costs doubled to $2 billion. Shimomura has accepted full responsibility in the scandal, which now raises the question as to whether a new stadium can be built in time for the 2020 Olympics. However, a new stadium design is due to be selected by November. The Mona Lisa could have been found. Italian researchers announced the discovery of bone fragments that could belong to Lisa Gherardini. She was the wife of Florentine silk merchant Francesco del Giocondo, and historians believe that she is the owner of the famous smile. A number of bodies have been found in the Saint Orsolio convent in Florence, but only a group of bone fragments came from the early 16th century when the portrait was painted. However, other experts are more cautious about the identity of these fragments. Dedicated cafes that offer only sweet options are packaged day and night in dessert-crazed Hong Kong. Sweet treats are so popular, some of these cafes are putting a new spin on traditional flavors, bringing innovation to the dessert culinary landscape. The city's adventurous diners are spoiled for choice with a variety of colorful and tasty desserts. That's good. For more on these and other stories, please visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We'll have another news brief for you this evening. Have a great day.